Okay, Izzy, now we're going to talk about the calendar, and this is the measure it beyond the day into the months and how to measure the months and the years. Here, as you can see, is an example of the Julian calendar, which you see is kind of different because of the lengths of each one. Like they have September being the 7th month. We know it's only the 9th month. October, 8th, November, and then the 10th would be December. You see how the months are kind of like mixed up a bit, and we're going to talk about that. So let's go on to beyond the day. I'm going to go on to my notes, talk about counting years. There we go. Counting years first. So how do we count years? So there's two different ways you can count years. One is the solar year and one is the lunar year. Do you know the difference? Solar means sun and lunar means noon. So the solar year is where the earth orbits the sun. And the time it takes for the earth to orbit the sun is 365.24 days. Because it is less time, you need leap years to measure it. So that's how we measure in a solar time. The lunar year is a little different. It's 12 lunar months, you see there at the top, but it is only 354.37 days for a lunar year. So a lunar year would be 11 days shorter than a solar year. So let's go back to the BC and AD of time. Now these are going to be all different calendars as we get into. That's why you need to know these details. So BC and AD, what does that mean? Well, we set that by actually Jesus Christ, by Jesus. BC means before Christ. Anno Domini means in the year of our Lord. That's AD. The thing about this type of calendar is that there's no 0 year. So 1 BC is just followed there by 1 AD. It's almost like you skipped a whole year there. So that may be a problem. But as we go on here, we'll see the astronomical year. What is that? Well, that is measuring by computers. So AD and BC are not written, and AD would be a positive number, and BC would be a negative number. 1 BC would be treated as 0 year. So you have to go on to 2 BC, which would be -1, and 1 AD as 1. So in this way, the astronomical year can account for that 1 year that's missing. And you can look at it by computer. There's another type of abbreviation here, and that is CE and BCE. That's what you'll see all the time, especially in certain texts where they do not want to have anything to do with Christianity. They want to replace it by these numbers. CE means the Common Era, and BCE means before the Common Era. So instead of before Christ in the year of our Lord, they're going to call this the Common Era. So you'll see that too in a lot of different places. So let's look down and let's see if I can get this bottom one. There we go. So now we'll talk about how many days are in a week. Well, 7 days. And this is very biblical because God said he created the earth in 7 days and he rested on the 7th day. So way back in time, it was kind of weird, but they decided in France that they wanted to not have a 7-day week because they were really against the Bible. So they decided that they would change this over to, as you see right here, 10 days. These 10-day weeks instead of the 7 days a week. And they were not based on any heavenly bodies at all. They were just going to change it. Well, it really didn't work very well. It's kind of like God really ordained the 7-day week. So that's the days and the months. So let's get to the calendars. Okay, I'm kind of like putting this together here so you can see it. Hopefully here we go. Calendars. Well, calendars began a long, long time before Rome, but Rome got very upset that they didn't have an accurate calendar. So they decided to develop a calendar. See how they spelled it? It's Kallendae. And this would go from month to month. Well, it really happened with Julius Caesar. You know Julius Caesar, and he lived in 100 BC to 44 BC. And he really needed to have an event calendar to when he was going to invade certain areas and everything he was going to do. So he said he would use the solar year. Well, the solar year was a little hard to put together. So there was a guy that he knew, Sosigenes, or I'm not sure how you actually pronounce that, Sosigenes maybe, of Alexandria. And he was an Egyptian, and he decided to do something for Julius Caesar and make the Julian calendar of 365 days with one leap year every 4 years. And so his names were a little bit different, like Quintilis and Julius, and Sextilis would be August. And so as you look at the calendar months were a little different than we have now. He would say, but there needed to be 4 30-day months, 7 31-day months, and 1 28-day months with a 29 leap year, such as we probably have today. We do have today, I should say. The Roman year began in March, though. And so that's what was a little confusing. Then gradually they moved Januaris and Februaris, and there were months 11 and 12, and they moved them to 1 and 2 throughout. So we're not really on the Julian calendar anymore. In fact, this next calendar is the calendar that we are on, the Gregorian calendar. So let's talk about the Gregorian calendar. See, the Julian calendar was off by 11 minutes per year. That's quite a bit. So in 1582, a calendar was way off when the seasons came. So by 1582, they found out that the seasons did not agree with the calendar. So when it was spring was running into winter, and they were all turning out different of the seasons. So they knew they had to do something. So Pope Gregory the 8th in 1572 to 1585 said, man, we really need a new calendar. Our seasons are off. So how do they do this? He said, we're going to drop 10 days, set the seasons back. And so on October 4th, they skipped all the way to October 15th. So hopefully you weren't born between those days, or you would have really missed your birthday, because they skipped about over a week there to get caught up on their seasons and to make things equal with their seasons. And then they said that as for the leap years, they said the leap years need to be divisible by 400. So if you would have if your leap year, if it was the year 1600, that's divisible by 400. And the year 2000 would be divisible by 400. So those years would be leap years. So a year that's 17, 18, 19 would not be leap years. So this is pretty similar to the Julian calendar, only with more years. Still, it is not perfect, of course. In fact, it still was 26 seconds longer than a solar year. So there's in 1 day an error, but the error wouldn't happen until 3,200 years in the future, but it would still be off. So even that Gregorian calendar, but now we use this Gregorian calendar. We use it all over the world. In fact, we use it in America. In fact, in 1700, Germany and Denmark decided to use it. In 1752, Britain, 1873, Japan, China, 1911, Russia, 1918. So those there at the bottom. So that's the two basic calendars. Well, we do have other calendars. So what you're saying, what other calendars could there be? Well, get this out right here. There we go. The first calendar would be the Jewish calendar. So how would the Jewish calendar be different? Let's look. The Jewish calendar starts the day that Adam and Eve were created. And they estimate this day by the Bible in the Old Testament. They tried to go back with the Jewish rabbis, and they said this day would be 3,761 BC. And so they took this to find all the religious holidays and the secular holidays, and they would add this number to the current year. So we wouldn't have any, before Christ or after Christ, they would just go by. So their calendar now is like, up into the 6,000s. So we don't really know how accurate they were, but they use the Jewish people still use this kind of calendar. The other kind of calendar, the next kind of calendar, another thing about their calendar before I go on to the Hindu calendar is that the Jewish calendar always begins in September or October on Rosh Hashanah. So they don't have a January. They have the New Year is actually in October. Okay, the Hindu calendar, they have several calendars, and they're all crazy calendars because they go by crazy. They have like thousands of gods that go by different calendars. And so it's really hard to go take a Hindu calendar and find out what date you're on. Islamic calendars dates from the year AD 622. Why? Because that's the year Muhammad journeyed to Medina. Of course, Islam is centered, on the Muslim religion. And so they start their day at that time. So they're very into the lunar month. So they go by 354 days a year. So they're going to be off quite a bit as they go through history, but still, that's the Islamic calendar. Joseph Scaliger, 1583, he developed a calendar that went by solar, and he used the UTC calendar the Julian calendar beginning on January 1st, 4713 BC, and the Gregorian calendar, and he took that date, and then he started using decimals for the day. So he ended up saying January 1st, 218 would be 2,458, 2,458,120 days. So he modified this calendar into going into decimal days. So one other calendar is the Mayan calendar, and it is extremely, extremely accurate. We won't get into all that, but the Mayan calendar did go by the stars and the moon and the sun. And it's very unusual that this calendar would be by primitive people. So it looks back in that time that they weren't so primitive as we thought they were in the Native American Mayan calendar in South America back in time. So I hope you kind of got into these calendars. I'm going to go into the next section, which is going to be on ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, and climates, but I think I'll stop here.